So what's up, guys? How are you? It's Wei from Revolution Magazine, here with my buddy Ron, who is a guy I met about a couple weeks ago, and I have discovered he's got one of the most insane Daytona collections, and specifically Paul Newman Daytona collections on the planet. I mean, he's got just the best of the best pieces. He's very kindly invited us to come over and take a look at some of his watches. But first, a lot of you guys are always asking, what is Singapore style, right? So Singapore is a very hot and very humid country. So let's, Ron, how would you describe the way we dress?
T-shirt, Bermudas, shorts, slippers, and it's so relaxed, it's so cold, and I think nobody cares about dressing good, and so that's how I dress today.
So we're gonna stand up and show you what Singapore style is. All right, so Singapore style, you gotta have either a t-shirt or like a very comfortable sort of tropical shirt. You have to have shorts, but they can't be stylish shorts. They have to be like dad shorts, right? Like they gotta be like oversized Bermudas. Yeah. And then you have to have slippers. But most importantly, you have to have a sick watch, correct?
Oh, that's true.
Right? Because in Singapore, everyone dresses the same. The only way you identify yourself is by your watch, correct?
Oh, yes, oh, yes.
Exactly, all right. Yes. So like in Singapore, I guess the two most popular, I guess the two coolest watches you could rock up to, one would be, if you're into contemporary watches, probably like a Richard Mille,
yes,
or an AP. And then if you're into vintage watches, then you're in the world of the Paul Newman Daytona, which I know is something that's you're very passionate about, Ron. So
yes,
how'd you get into Daytonas, first of all, and why specifically Paul Newman's?
Okay, so I think it was many years ago, 2013-14, I was looking for a watch.
Right.
I want to search for something that suits my wrist. So what happened was, I went to search a lot of internet, and I saw a lot of watches, like the GMTs, the Submarinas, and the Submarinas was like an instant hit, like a cult culture, cult classic.
Yes.
So I was thinking maybe Submarina suits me.
Cool.
So I went to this shop in Singapore,
right,
and they sell a lot of some vintage Submarinas, and I remember my first watch was a 1680. And I put it on my wrist. Wow, it's so beautiful. The case is, the watch is so beautiful. The case is so small. And I thought, wow, this is a nice watch. So I bought it and I keep it. And then suddenly, I have a friend who told me, hey Ron, have you heard about the Paul Newman Daytona?
How many years ago was this?
This is like 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
4 or 5 years ago.
Dude, you got this collection in 5 years? That's incredible.
But the story haven't ended.
Okay.
So he told me, you got to see this Paul Newman Daytona. I said, what's for Paul Newman Daytona?
Right.
So one fine day he showed me this piece.
Right.
He said, hey Ron, look at this dial.
Right.
I said, what is that? Just a Daytona. You know? I just said, just a Daytona.
Right.
And he told me, wow, put it on your wrist.
Yes.
So I just took it up, I put it on my wrist.
Right.
Wow, it felt so magical.
It's amazing, right?
Yes, it's amazing. Wow. I said, how much is this? 200,000 US.
Yes.
What? 200,000 US for this? What?
It's what he's talking about, specifically a 6263 Panda, and actually $200,000 US 5 years ago. Wish we could all transport ourselves back in time and buy as many of them as possible.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes.
But you're talking about you put it on immediately and you had an emotion for it. Is that
yes,
right?
there's a huge emotion. It's beautiful. The dial is beautiful. The Art Deco design.
Yes.
The plastic bezel.
Yes.
So I thought, wow, 200,000 for a watch like this. What? I can buy many Submarinas.
Yeah. Indeed.
Indeed. So after that, because it costs $200,000, I've got to get some knowledge on it.
Right.
So what I did was I spent the next 2 years trying to find the right knowledge for the Paul Newmans.
Right.
So my first purchase was actually in 2016, not 2014. Yes.
Amazing. So you spent like 4 years gaining the knowledge.
Yes, because
I love that. It's like if he wanted to learn Kung Fu, he would go to Shaolin Temple and like train for 4 years first before the. So the first purchase is a big one then. Very important. Which one was that?
So my first purchase was a 6264 JPS.
Right.
6264 JPS is so rare.
Yes.
I think I've only seen like 3 or 4 pieces in the world.
Okay, guys, let me just break it up a little bit for you to understand. 6264 is a transitional reference, right? So the pump pusher watches are 6241 and 6239, and then you have 6264 and 6262. 6262 and 6264 are different in that they have the pump pusher case, but you're using the movement 727, which beats at 21,600, okay, which is increased from the 18,000 vibrational speed of the 722, which was in the previous generation pump pushers. So you have the modern movement in the old case, correct?
Oh yes, that's right. And it's so beautiful. And then I bought the watch in 2016.
Right.
And then in less than a month, someone offered me, wow, I'm so stunned. In less than a month, someone offered me the watch for like a premium. So at that point of time, I need some cash for my house. So I decided to sell that watch.
Wow. Well, if you don't mind my asking, how much of a premium did you make on it?
About 100 US.
Wow. So that was your first purchase.
And I bought a watch for 500 euro.
Wow. And someone offered you an additional $100,000 on top of it.
Yes, that's
Amazing.
right. But I know where the watch went to.
Right.
It went to a Hong Kong actor. So yes, it went to a Hong Kong actor. So
Great.
I was like, oh shit.
Anyone we know? What is his name, Ryan Lack?
Sean Yue.
Oh, okay, Sean. What's up, Sean? Yeah, love your watch.
Yes.
So of the, let's say under 20,000 pump pusher Daytonas that were made, 6239, 6241, 6262, 6264, it is speculated that 3 to 4% of them were gold, right? So that makes the number of watches very few. And then on top of that, let's say only 10% of those, or maybe maximum 15% of those were made in the Paul Newman varietal. You're talking about really a handful of watches. And then to find one that's in extraordinary condition like this is something quite amazing. So this is my buddy Ron, 6241, yellow gold, Paul Newman Daytona. The gold Paul Newmans were made in 3 dial variations. They had a cream color dial, which I think is maybe the most common, even though you're talking about really very rare watches. The lemon dial, which is the rarest, and then the black dial, which is known as the
JPS.
which means?
John Player Special.
Which is based on the F1 racing team from the 1970s, because their livery was gold and black.
Oh,
right?
yes.
So tell us about this amazing timepiece.
Okay, this amazing timepiece. After I sold my first 6264 JPS, what happened was I was quite upset. I was thinking every night, I couldn't sleep every night. I was thinking, how can I get back a piece at the same price again? But I know it's virtually impossible.
Right.
So what I do is, I'm just waiting, searching Instagram, searching for some dealers, waiting for a JPS to be auctioned in the auction houses.
Right.
And then one fine day, just nice, I don't know what happened, my friend contacted me and told me, hey Ron, there's a JPS for sale. Are you interested? I said, how much? He said, XXX amount. I said, okay, I want.
Wow.
I never even hesitate for a moment.
Yes.
So I said, I want it. I'm paying much more premium than I paid for my 6264 JPS.
Right.
So what happened was, he told me, I asked him about the condition of the watch, the dial, the case, the numbers, the serials, and he told me everything is original.
Everything's correct.
Yes.
Right?
So,
and let me ask you this, Ron, because you bring up a good question, which is a question I ask myself a lot. When you're looking for these type of vintage watches that are extremely rare, are you willing to pay a premium for the best examples?
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm willing to pay for the future price
Yes.
for
Yes.
good pieces.
Exactly.
So look at this case. Look at this case. It's so crisp.
Yes.
So crisp. And look at this. This is a 14K JPS.
Yes.
But look at the color. It looks like a champagne pink color.
Well, you know what's interesting too? So the Rolex made their gold watches in both 14K and 18K. The speculation is that 14K went primarily to the American market and 18K went to the European market. So if you look at actually the way in which the watch is oxidized, 14K has a tendency to sort of, kind of change and transform and gain some patina. This is an 18K watch. The 14K watches, having a slightly less pure amount of gold, tend to gain a very interesting patina. But look at this case, it's gained the most extraordinary patina. And you like that, right?
Absolutely. I love patinas because it adds characters to the watch.
Yes. So, Ron, why don't we talk about, okay, so I think the watch that people associate with the Paul Newman most commonly is the 6239 because that's the watch that he was wearing for many years, correct?
Yes.
And that was the watch that achieved the sort of crazy result at Phillips last year. So you have on your wrist the 6239 and also 6241, which is essentially the same watch but with an acrylic bezel.
Yes.
Tell us why you like these watches so much.
Well, it's not for Paul Newman that I bought the watch. Actually, I saw this watch like many years ago, like 2015. I remember I saw the 6241.
Right.
The acrylic blazer make the watch look a little bit bigger.
Yes.
And I love it so much. But there's one thing about the dial that is so striking. What do I mean? You look at the dial, you will see like the red, the white, and the black.
Yes.
It's so striking.
Yes.
And I compare it to a 6239 after that.
Yes.
This is a metal bezel.
Yes.
And the only difference is just the
bezel.
The
yeah.
bezel.
Yes.
The movement, everything is just the same.
Yes.
And so why do I buy two? Since it's since it's just a bezel difference, because the 6239 is the start of a Paul Newman.
Yeah.
It's always good to have something that like is the origin of the whole collection.
Right.
You know.
So just to let you guys back it up a little bit, back to 1963, Rolex launches the Daytona, which is their manual wind chronograph with their tachymetric scale on the bezel, right? And it's meant to be a car for auto enthusiasts. Somewhere in the sort of mid 60s, 65, or 67, I think, they come up with the exotic dials, right?
Oh yes.
And the exotic dials are what become known as the Paul Newman, which is these incredible three-color stepped dials, which have, to our belief, kind of one of the most beautiful, most iconic designs of all time,
Absolutely.
right? But the funny thing was that, first of all, the Daytona was not a success, correct? The original Daytona, the manual wind Daytona, was not a success. And on top of that, the Paul Newmans were even less successful, correct?
Oh yes. Nobody wants it.
So this wonderful sort of thing about why these watches, well, first of all, they were unsuccessful. Well, to be fair, and I've got my own 6241 here, the thing about it, the Daytona, was that it was in an oyster case, right? Which means you have to unscrew the crown in order to wind it or set the time, which probably drove people a little bit nuts after a while, right? And Paul Newman famously left his crown unwound or unscrewed the entire time, so it's just he could have easier access to winding it. Now let's compare that, because, okay, still, it's a beautiful watch, but let's compare that to another watch of the era from 1965-66, which is the 105.03, which is also known as the Ed White Speedmaster from Omega. First thing that you notice is the watch is quite a bit bigger, so it's a lot more visible. The Omegas were the first to actually have the tachymetric scale on the bezel, so they had that as sort of originating that in terms of its iconography. But the thing about this watch was not only was it more visible, but you could put it on your wrist and you didn't have to unscrew anything. You could just start winding it,
Oh
right?
yes, oh yes.
And straight away it started working, which probably for a lot of people made it a lot more practical. And the last thing was, and I don't know how many people got into this, but this watch has a Valjoux 72 in it, specifically Valjoux 72-2, which is an 18,000 vibrational speed movement, which is a very good movement. This watch, on the other hand, has the Lemania 2310, which is probably the most famous chronograph movement of all time, right? It's the in Patek speak, it's the Lemania CH27. So this watch, successful at the time. This watch, not so successful at the time. But the great thing about that is that means this is a lot more rare, right? So if we think about it, I think the statistics we've been given for pump pusher Paul Newmans is that of the, was it 8-9 years that they were made, right? The total number of them is under 20,000. You compare that with Speedmasters. So for example, if you were to take a 145.012, which is the last 321 caliber equipped Speedmaster, in 1 year, in one reference alone, of that reference, they made 28,000 of them, right? And that's just one reference. They made so many of them. So the Daytona to begin with is a much rarer watch, and then the Paul Newmans, because of their lack of success, were particularly rare, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about Paul Newman in general. How is it that Paul Newman started wearing this watch, and why is this watch called the Paul Newman Daytona? Well, the whole sort of mythology is, and this was also, bear in mind, given to the watch by Italians, specifically Italian dealers. So they're very good at like generating mythology, was that he appeared in an Italian magazine cover wearing this watch. I don't know if that's true, because I've never seen that magazine cover, but what is certainly true is he used to wear this watch all the time. And he was bought a Paul Newman or an exotic dial Daytona by his wife, Joanne Woodward,
Oh, yes.
and it was given to him as a gift, right? Now, think about it from this perspective. If you're a guy in a watch shop in New York, here I think it was New York, right? And they're all very smart salesmen, and a woman walks and says, "My husband is a race car driver." Oh, really? And I would like to buy him a chronograph. Oh, excellent. What are you going to try to sell? You're going to try to sell the most expensive thing that you can't sell because no one else wants to buy it. And you're like, "Can I show you a Daytona, madam?" Right? And then you're like, "Oh, well, wait a second. I have that one with the exotic dial that no one wants to buy. I'm going to show that to her." And conceivably, as a woman who judges things based on emotion and aesthetics, you know, she'd be like, "Wow, that's actually quite pretty." So she bought the 6239, this watch, with the exotic Paul Newman dial on it, or exotic dial, gave it to Paul Newman, engraved the back, right, with this very beautiful message.
Drive carefully, me.
Drive Carefully, me, from Joanne Woodward, and which has become part of the legend. And he would wear this watch all the time, and that's where it became known as the Paul Newman Daytona.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So cool. Okay, so let's continue. So you got 6239, 6241. What else do you have? Oh, you've got an amazing transitional watch, a 6262, which is also marked with a very interesting sort of dealer name on it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I have a 6262,
Yes.
and it's marked with a double signature called Linz. And Linz is a Dallas jeweler. What they did is they put the stamp or the signature on the dial, and I think there were just very, very handful of them
Right.
in the market today.
Right.
So the last one I saw was in Philips.
Incredible.
The Philips auction.
Yes.
And there's another one that I saw, I think I saw it on Philips Styles website.
Yes.
And
But you know, Ron, when you're buying something like this as well, you know, because there are double signature watches from Tiffany's, from Linz, from Bayer, even if I'm not mistaken. How careful do you have to be in terms of researching the provenance of?
oh, very careful though, because it's double signature.
Right.
It can be a counterfeit. I don't know.
Right.
But before I buy the watch, I did all my homework, and so that's how I got the watch.
And do you mind my asking, these watches, the 6239, the 6241, and your 6262 Linz, do you tend to buy them from dealers that you really trust, or from auctions, or?
Okay, so all my watches I bought from one dealer. I only bought from one dealer because I like the dealer so much. We can click. We are friends. So I just bought it from one dealer. So over the years, I've seen a lot of watches that he sold, and I'm quite impressed with his collection. So that's why I give it a trust.
Where's he based?
Italy.
Oh, okay.
Italy.
Is it the really big guy in Italy?
Not really the big guy in Italy.
Okay.
But the sub guy in Italy.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yes.
Amazing.
But his watches is more like, he focused more on quality and rarity.
Right.
And I told him when I bought the watch, I said I want something that is so condition good, rare, quality. So he knows my style.
Right.
And if you check the dial of all these watches, you will
Yes.
see that it's so clean,
all
so perfect.
perfect,
Yeah,
right.
they're all perfect.
Well, okay, but there's rarity that in terms of just the number of watches that were produced, but there's also rarity in terms of how the watches age with time, right?
yes,
And
absolutely.
I had this conversation with my buddy Jeff from Analog Shift, and what I love about patina is that watches were created initially to be uniform products, but age has a particular effect on each individual piece to make it unique, right?
Yes.
And in some certain cases, that effect is particularly beautiful, and those are watches that have tropical effects on them, correct?
Absolutely.
And you have an amazing 6239 with tropical subdials on that.
Oh yes, this is a 6239 with an amazing subtropical dials, and it's so beautiful that if you go under the sun,
Yes.
it just spark in your eyes though.
Wow,
Yes,
amazing.
Yes.
So, the thing is that they're called tropical dials because UV light affects the black and it changes it into sort of a caramel brown color, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
But you've also got something that I believe is even rarer, which is a screw pusher panda dial watch with a matching tropical seconds track and subdials, right? A Mark II Panda, but with that effect on it,
This is the watch that I've been searching for a long, long time. So I've seen a lot of Mark II dials. They tropicalize over the time. I mean, certain Mark IIs. And there's one in Philips that was sold like $1 million. And it was Auto Track tropical. And it was quite beautiful. And I saw a few more like a tropical Auto Track. And I thought like, wow, the watches that is tropicalized, I was wondering what life did the watch suffer?
Yes. Like who owned it and
Yes,
how
who
did
owned it?
that get the exposure happen, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
So,
I lived in Singapore.
so one day when my friend told me, Ron, you got to see this watch. I said, what watch? A Panda Mark II dial. I said, Mark II dial is so common, I can
Yes.
just get it anywhere.
Yes.
Ron, look closer. Look at this dial. 3 tropical sub dials, and the Auto Track. Auto Track has
Wow,
turned tropical.
that's incredible.
That's incredible. So I said, show me the watch.
Right.
So I checked the watch. I checked the screw pushers.
Yes.
I checked the serial number. I checked the bezel, everything. Wow, I said, you got to sell me this watch. You've got to sell me this watch.
Amazing.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So he hesitated for a long, long time.
Right.
And I said, you just name a price, I would pay for the watch.
Right.
Okay. So he gave me a price, and I just
And
off
you,
it
and you
goes.
went for it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. As we were talking about the Oyster case, they created these screw pusher watches. At the same time, they put the new version of the movement in it, the Valjoux 727, which had the 21,600 vibrational speed in it. And they created just a very, very beautiful watch. So they come in 3 different dial versions, Mark I, 1.5, and Mark II. The way I tell the difference is if I imagine the R on the Rolex font on the dial to be a dog, right? So, okay, bear with me. So if on the Mark I, if that R was a dog, it would be a dachshund because its little leg is very small and stubby, right? On a Mark 1.5, it's got a longer leg and the leg curves. And on the Mark II, the leg is long, but it has a very sharp step angle to it,
Yes,
correct?
that's right, that's
so
right.
that, if you look at it closely, it's fairly easy to distinguish one from the other. Now, the reason that the Mark Is go for such a premium is that they are
Rare.
they're the
Extremely
rarest.
rare.
Yeah, the rarest. So if you're interested in a screw pusher or a Panda, that's maybe the way to go. There are also 2 other types of Paul Newmans we should talk about in the screw pusher case. One is the Oyster Soto, or the black dial Paul Newman 3-color dial watches, which say Rolex, Cosmograph, and then Oyster underneath, Oyster Soto being Italian for oyster under. Now, the speculation for those watches that they were actually dials made for the transitional models 6262 or 6264, and once they went to the screw pusher case, they were now able to call the watch an oyster, right? Because none of them say oyster before that. And so they took some of those black dials which they had left over, they printed oyster on the bottom of that, and they put them in a few watches. Now, was this a regular production watch? Probably not, I'm inclined to believe. Was it something that Rolex created? I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe in kind of a prototype kind of way, maybe, you know? One thing that is probably the most rare of all of these watches are the gold Paul Newmans.
Absolutely.
Screw pusher gold Paul Newmans, people believe there's maybe 3 to 5 of them in existence, right? And the legend, or the watch that's called the legend, is a lemon dial screw pusher 62, is it 63 or 65?
6263.
6263, which is a stunning watch and sold for, what's it, 1.8 or?
3 million.
Oh, excuse me, $3 million, which until the Paul Newman auction came up last year was one of the heftiest priced Daytonas of all time. Now, if you read my interview with Eric Koo, and when I ask him, so dude, tell me, were these watches actually made by Rolex? He's gonna say, and he said very responsibly, because he's a responsible guy, dude, they're probably more like a prototype kind of thing, right? But the number of those watches is so small, and the existence of those watches is so unique that the guys who are in the market for those watches all know where all 3 to 4 of those watches in the world are and who has them. So they kind of go from one collector to another, basically.
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
But in the meantime, something like this, which is aged by time, in some ways is even rarer because you'll never find something like that.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay, so I brought a couple of my own Daytonas as well. I brought my 6241 Paul Newman as well, like your watch. And I brought a 6265 yellow gold watch, which I bought in 2009 for what at the time I thought was a lot of money, but in comparison to the prices today, is probably not a lot of money. It is a 6265, as Ron points out, because it's got a gold bezel on it as opposed to an acrylic bezel. The cool thing about these watches is they're using the Valjoux 727, 21,600 vibrational speed, but the gold ones were the first ones to be cost certified. Kind of cool. And so if you have a watch with this and it comes with full box and papers, it should also come with a cost certificate. Now, let's leap forward to the future and to 1988, right? Yes. And in 1988, Rolex is like, okay, we got to do something about this because our Daytonas are not selling. We got to come up with an automatic chronograph, and they came up with this, right? This is the classic automatic Rolex Daytona, the watch that became a watch that had a 5-year waiting list. Everyone from the Japanese Yakuza to the Italian Mafia wanted one, you know, and it became kind of a symbol of you getting the watch that no one else could get. You put it on your wrist, you see immediately that it is the watch that is the Rolex Daytona today. Oh, yes. It's much beefier, it's got a great presence on it. Ron, I'll ask you to put it on maybe, and you tell me what you think about it. What's great about this watch is in order to create the automatic movement, they went to Zenith, they got the El Primero movement, but the El Primero movement normally beats at what vibrational speed summit? 5. At 5 hertz. But Rolex, being Rolex, was concerned about long-term viability issues, so they decided let's detune it to 4 hertz. So that watch is an El Primero beating at 28,800 vibrations per hour. Now, what's interesting about this particular watch is that it is an original one from 1988, the R series, which kicked off the first automatic series of Daytonas. You can tell this because it's got a floating cosmograph, which is the line that says cosmograph is essentially detached from the rest of the print. And you can tell it's an R series in particular because it's the last watch in the Daytonas to have the base over 200 bezel, right, tachymeter. So that is essentially it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Ron, thank you so much for sharing your incredible collection. Bro, I think you've got the sickest collection of Paul Newman Daytonas on the planet, man. So thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, and now after this, we're gonna put on our watches and chill out Singapore style. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.